Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You got Dank and we got Jeremy here with me. We're here to tell you some stories and talk about Measure 91. A lot of it will be about Measure 91, the legalization initiative here in the state of Oregon. You see the new lawn signs that Jeremy picked up today, and they're in. You can pick up your lawn sign at 1603 Oak Street in Eugene. That's the Measure 91 Eugene office.
And they're asking a $10 suggested donation for them.
Yep. And so display it proudly. They still got bumper stickers. Did you see any of those around? Do you remember?
I think they might be out of bumper stickers right now, but they have regular stickers.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I got those round stickers too.
Yeah.
So anyway, pick up some stuff there and sign up. And
they're still looking for volunteers to call people to remind them to vote, and other tabling events and stuff like that they're doing.
Yep, excellent, very important. We've got 7 days to get registered to vote. Now you got to be registered to vote by October 14th to vote in the November 4th election. So it sounds all confusing, but the point is you got 1 week to get signed up. That's the bottom line, to be able to vote in the upcoming election. So, and don't forget, felons can vote in the state of Oregon. That's a very common misconception that people don't know that, and it's true.
The other thing is, if you are registered to vote but not at your current address, you only have 7 days to change it.
Exactly, good point. Yes, definitely. And get your friends and family to register to vote. So, and let's get started. We got some great registered guards. Been having quite a bit of stuff on the cannabis issue in general. Now, we'll start out with a letter to the editor. It was in the registered guard, titled, dated the September 23rd, titled "Make Marijuana Easier to Obtain." After having 2 heart attacks and a stroke and trying many drugs that didn't help me, my doctor prescribed medical marijuana. I finally got my life back and found relief from most of my problems. I was on pot for 3 years, lost 40 pounds, and my overall physical and emotional health improved. Then my doctor said his boss wouldn't allow me to prescribe it anymore, so he cut me off, not even bothering to offer me another form of treatment. We must legalize marijuana, especially if doctors are going to base their practices on religious, political, or philosophical grounds and not on solid, proven medicine. All my doctor had to do was refer to my chart and medical history to be assured marijuana was working for me, and may have even extended my life. I urge everyone to vote yes on Measure 91 to legalize recreational pot in Oregon. Don't let law enforcement control the conversation or talking points by spreading misinformation, as they did the last time legalization was on the ballot. There's no reason for doctors to deny their patients a drug that works. Anyone who has had a good experience with marijuana should be, as I'm doing, write a letter to spread the truth. As we near the November 4th election, I hope voters will learn the positives about pot and some of the bonuses, such as more tax dollars raised by our state for our state coffers. And that was from Jim Puglia and Myrtle Point. And that's a good point that he brings up. And the only thing is, the first sentence, so he talks about his doctor prescribed medical marijuana. Well, if he got that permit in Oregon, the doctor didn't prescribe it for him. Technically, it's not correct, but he did. But anyway, he did get the permit. So anyway, and the next story, Jeremy.
Remember stoned drivers on November 4th. On August 9th, a young race car driver named Kevin Ward was killed while racing. He crashed into his car into a wall, then for some reason exited the vehicle, walked towards the middle of a track, and was hit and killed by a car driven by Tony Stewart. Tests later revealed Ward had smoked marijuana prior to racing that day. Could the marijuana be responsible for him losing control of his car and hitting the wall? No. Could the marijuana have influenced him in walking in front of other race cars? No. The answer to of both questions is most likely yes. Whatever, that's not true. Think about that when voting in the November 4th election. Do we really want more stoned people driving in Oregon? I don't think so. Well, this person has their facts wrong because the insurance companies did studies and they actually proved that stoned drivers are more likely to actually drive better and drive a little slower, if anything, and that they're not nearly as likely to get in an accident as someone who consumed alcohol.
Okay, now you mentioned comment in with a letter, and you missed the last sentence. His last sentence says, vote no on Measure 91, which would make recreational marijuana legal in Oregon. That's written by Mike Lynch in Eugene. So, yeah, anyway, Mike Lynch apparently believes that all that is true. So, anyway, we don't agree, but
makes you wonder what he's smoking.
yeah. So, and this is the real shocker. History was made September 28th. The Register Guard in an election endorsement came out. Legal, regulated marijuana? Yes. Measure 91 would help curb black market and stop making criminals of pot smokers. That's amazing, the Register Guards do that. I mean, that is flat amazing. I've known in years past, people referred to the Register Guard as a liberal paper. And I remember telling my wife at the time, well, if they're a liberal paper, I must be a flaming radical. And she says, oh, you are. But anyway, so here we go, Register Guard. This is what they wrote. Barack Obama and his two predecessors as President of the United States smoked marijuana when they were young men. The experience may not have propelled them forward, but it resulted in no lasting impairment. They were lucky. If any of the three had been arrested for possession of marijuana, as more than 13,000 Oregonians were last year, their futures would have been ruined, not because of the drug, but because of the law. So Election 214 is here. Measure 91 on the November 4th ballot would change the law, making it legal for adult Oregonians to use marijuana for non-medical purposes. The drug would be regulated by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, though with somewhat tighter controls than exist for alcohol. Measure 91 is superior in important respects to the legalization initiative approved 2 years ago in Washington State and Colorado, though all three share the fundamental virtue of recognizing the current policy of prohibition does more harm than good. Americans should vote yes. Despite the threat of arrest and the lasting consequences that follow, marijuana is widely used in Oregon. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, about 12% of adult Oregonians smoke pot regularly, the equivalent of the population of Lane County. A great many more have tried the drug at some point in their lives. The police can't arrest all these people. An analysis of FBI data by the Washington Post showed that Oregon made 17 arrests per 1,000 pot smokers in 2012. The result is uneven enforcement, with the penalties falling disproportionately on those who are black, brown, poor, or young. With marijuana use so widespread, even a low arrest rate yields a large number of pot busts. About 7% of all arrests in Oregon are for simple pot possession. The police and the courts have better things to do with their resources, including enforcing marijuana laws that could remain after approval of Measure 91, such as laws against providing or selling marijuana to minors and driving while intoxicated by marijuana. Removing a threat of a drug bust from the lives of nearly everyone in nearly 1 in 8 otherwise law-abiding Oregonians would be one primary benefit of Measure 91. Another would be to kill or cripple the black market in marijuana. Prohibition keeps drug dealers in business. Dealers who have no compunction against selling pot and other drugs to children, selling products of dubious purity, and feeding profits to organized criminal enterprises. Measure 91 would pinch one of the conduits for the cash that finances drug cartels by bringing much of the underground marijuana economy into the open, where it could be monitored, regulated, and taxed. Under Measure 91, legal sales of marijuana would be taxed at a rate of $35 per ounce. a rate low enough to ensure that licensed outlets could compete with illicit sources, yet high enough to generate revenue for the state. The Legislative Revenue Office estimates that the marijuana tax revenues in the first biennium would amount to $46.6 million. 40% of the money would be dedicated to public school, 35% to law enforcement, and 25% to drug education, treatment, and mental health programs. Revenues flowing directly to the state would be only part of the picture. The entire marijuana supply chain would move out of the shadows. Pot that is currently grown on booby-trapped plots on public lands would be produced by licensed, tax-paying farmers. Processing, distribution, and retailing would generate taxable profits and wages. Measure 91 would allow people to grow up to 4 marijuana plants for their own use, unlike Washington's law, which bans home pot growing, and Colorado's, which allows up to 12 plants. Pot growers in Oregon would be in a position analogous to that of home brewers, who are prohibited from selling their beer or producing more than a reasonable amount. Commercial growers and sales outlets would be licensed by the OLCC, as is the case with alcohol. In other respects, marijuana would be more tightly controlled than alcohol. Employers' requirement that workers be drug-free as a condition of employment would remain in effect, as would any landlord-tenant agreements prohibiting drug use. Marijuana could not be sold near schools or used in public places. Marijuana could not be exported to or imported from other states. Though the tide of public opinion has shifted in favor of legalization, many remain apprehensive about the social aspects of placing marijuana alongside alcohol and tobacco as legal drugs. It's likely that marijuana will prove to be the least damaging of the three, but pot can cloud people's judgment, sap their ambition, and result in addiction. Society is already feeling these effects because marijuana is so widely used. Prohibition compounds the social effects by adding unwanted legal and economic consequences. It's time to strip away those consequences and address the issues of drug use more rationally and effectively. Measure 91 deserves a yes vote. So the registered guard, you finally got it right. Congratulations. I didn't think you could do it. The comment about addiction, I think is pretty much been debunked. I've heard that it can be addicting mentally, but not physically.
Yeah, I mean, people obviously feel better when they have it, when they need it, but they're not addicted to it the same way that people get addicted to Percocet or something like that.
Yeah, and so now so that's the Register Guard, the Oregonian, and the Statesman Journal just came out, by the way, and endorsed 91, as well as a paper in Eastern Oregon. I can't remember which one it is, but so anyway, there's four newspapers, 4 state newspapers, and 3 of them are biggies that have endorsed Measure 91. So shock. So
it's about time. But
yeah. So like the Anthony Taylor says, we're in great shape to win, but it's not a done deal. So we still need people to register to vote and get prepared for it, because it's coming. So we're going to wrap this up, and we'll see you in the next segment. We got more information, so come on back.
If you're an adult who enjoys a good beer, there's a similar product you might want to know about. One without all the calories and serious health problems. Less toxic so it doesn't cause hangovers or overdose deaths, and it's not linked to violence or reckless behavior. Marijuana, less harmful than alcohol, and time to treat it that way. For more information, visit marijuanaissafer.org.
Welcome back to the second half of Eugene Cannabis TV. You made the trip, and forgot to tell you earlier, but this is episode 549. You got Dank here and my friend Jeremy in helping tonight, and Jeremy is going to read another letter to the editor from the Register Guard. It came out on the 4th of October.
Pot tax talk has amusing aspects. There's nothing funnier than adults saying and doing the darndest things. I found a lot of humor in the September 30 story about Eugene officials considering joining with a number of other Oregon cities to enact a local tax on marijuana sales. Eugene to consider taxing pot. There's nothing like an imminent threat of voters using the democratic process to restrict a city's ability to raise taxes. So non-unparalleled harms, civics at their finest. But that's okay because our community would be disappointed if we did not take advantage of this window of opportunity on their behalf, Mayor Kitty Piercy. Clearly, there would be unrest in the streets if City Council fumbled away an opportunity to create a new tax. Whether a local marijuana tax would withstand a legal challenge doesn't matter because legal fees cannot be paid.
Legal fees can be paid with fairy
dust. Further, local tax proponents like the idea of generating more money for local governments. Piercy, how profound. A local marijuana tax is clearly needed because as the new money would help Eugene pay for additional law enforcement costs related to legalized recreational marijuana use. Council President Chris Pryor said, well, what about all the money that they're saving by not
just read the article and then comment when you're done. Go ahead.
Apparently, we've been wrong all these years in thinking the war on drugs was draining our tax coffers. That our city leaders can make such arguments with straight faces makes me laugh. Chris Ellington, Eugene. Yeah, that's my point. They're forgetting about all the money that they've been spending already on the prohibition of it that they're going to save. So really, there's no point in raising the tax.
That's it. That's it. They're all for prohibition, and if it were actually up to them, they wouldn't even allow it. They don't want it. They don't allow it. But the irony, they got no choice. It's coming anyway. So guess what? Well, let's make some money on it. Hypocrites. That's how you hypocrites. That's all it is to it. So, the article that that letter editor was referring to is this one here. This was in the Register Guard, dated September 30th, written by Edward Russo, titled "Eugene to Consider Taxing Pot." Subtitled, "The City Council will decide whether to attempt to grandfather in a local measure before a statewide vote." Following Springfield's lead, Eugene will discuss whether to impose a local tax on the recreational use of marijuana. The City Council will discuss the potential tax sometime in the next couple of weeks before state voters on November 4th will decide the fate of the legalization proposal, Measure 91. Eugene Mayor Kersey has asked City Manager John Roos to place the matter on the city's agenda as soon as a spot becomes available. I just want to make sure we have the discussion and decide whether our City Council wants to do anything around the taxation of marijuana or not, Piercy said Monday. Measure 91 would legalize the recreational use of marijuana by adults 21 years of age and older and create a system to regulate its production and sale. But the measure also bars cities and counties from adopting a local tax and voids local ordinances that conflict with its provisions. If the Eugene Council gives city officials the okay to develop a pot tax, Eugene would join a growing number of Oregon cities that have either passed a local tax or are considering doing so before the November election. Despite the wording of Measure 91, some cities figure that they stand a chance of having their taxes grandfathered in if they approve them before the legalization. In July, Ashland imposed a 5% sales tax on medical marijuana and a 5% tax on recreational marijuana. Hillsborough is in line to impose a 10% tax on recreational marijuana but would not tax medical marijuana. Other cities, include Portland and Tigard, are discussing a tax. Last week, the Springfield City Council voiced support for approving a local marijuana tax. In an email to Eugene councilors last week, Piercy wrote that she had been following Springfield's deliberations on a marijuana tax. City Attorney Glenn Klein advised that such a tax may not stand up in court, Piercy wrote, but this would seem like an important discussion for our council to have, because if the law passed and a tax was in place, we could potentially raise considerable funds for city services. Our community would be disappointed if we did not take advantage of this window of opportunity on their behalf, she added. The Springfield City Council must approve an ordinance by October 20th, its final meeting before the November 4th election. Because the election is fast approaching, Piercy said she asked Ruse to put the topic on the council agenda without conducting a poll of councilors to see whether at least half favor the discussion. I don't do that very often, but this is a very short time frame, Piercy said. Measure 91 would tax marijuana only at the grower level, $35 per ounce for flowers, $10 per ounce for leaves, and $5 for each immature plant. The state revenue would be divided among schools, law enforcement agencies, and programs for treatment of alcoholism and drug abuse. Springfield's councilors say they expect the city to incur more costs if state voters legalize recreational marijuana use, such as more arrests for driving under the influence. They said a tax would raise revenue to help cover such costs. Springfield Finance Director Bob Dewey estimated that the city would receive $90,000 to $200,000 a year from its share of a state tax on marijuana, should voters approve Measure 91. Piercy acknowledged that it's uncertain whether a local tax on the sale of recreational marijuana would withstand a legal challenge to reconcile conflicts with the state law. But some think that if a local tax is approved before November 1st, it could remain in effect even if voters approve Measure 91. The Springfield City Attorney's Office, for example, told Springfield councilors that the legislature could repeal the local tax prohibition in the measure or allow local taxes approved before the measure's passage to remain in place. Piercy said the potential legalization of marijuana was a hot topic at the last week at the League of Oregon Cities conference in Eugene. Piercy said she hasn't decided whether she supports the tax. So, and page 3, there's 3 pages of this article. Local tax proponents like the idea of generating more money for local governments, she said. However, there's a concern that the illicit pot trade will continue to thrive if state and local taxes make legalized marijuana more expensive than illegal pot, Piercy said. There are a ton of issues, she said. For me, it seems responsible for us to have a preliminary discussion and see what those issues might be. Council President Chris Pryor wants to learn more about a local marijuana tax. It's a potential revenue generator, he said. The new money would help Eugene pay for additional law enforcement costs related to legalized recreational marijuana use, Pryor said, but the tax revenue also could help pay for other city programs, he said. Hopefully there will be sufficient revenue to talk about a variety of ways to help the community, Pryor said. See, so once again, Pryor, perfect example. He wouldn't touch marijuana with a 10-foot pole, but if it's coming, and he doesn't have a bit of problem making money off of it. And so.
It sounds like they're saying that they know it's illegal to tax marijuana according to Measure 91, and they're trying to do it anyways.
Yeah. And then on September 23rd, the Register Guard, Christian Hill wrote the following article, Springfield City Councilors endorse pot tax. And the subtitle is, the council will review and may vote on an ordinance taxing marijuana before Election Day. Second paragraph I want to point out, councilors said they expect the city will incur added costs if voters approve Measure 91, specifically citing more arrests for driving under the influence. They said a tax would help raise revenue to cover those costs. Well, there's a little something here that you don't see that's in this article. It's called DRE. Springfield has, in fact, if I remember correctly, Springfield's the only one in Lane County, has their own DRE officer. DRE stands for Drug Recognition Expert. So what they do is they take some police officer and send him through a 40-hour class, and at the end of that, upon graduation, he is presto, he is a DRE, officially recognized as a Drug Recognition Expert. So if one of the fellow officers, either an Oak Ridge City cop or Lane County Sheriff or state cop, if they pull over somebody and they seem like they think maybe they have some idea they may be impaired, they can actually call a DRE. And in this case, the one in Springfield. I've known a case once that state cop had the DRE officer from Springfield go all the way up to Willamette Pass and cite a friend of mine for being under the influence, which he wasn't. But anyway, so the DRE, it's a real joke, and we've had a lawyer on this show before. And the important thing I want you to know about DRE is that if you were to get pulled over by an encounter a drug recognition expert, and if they ask you, do you submit to a drug recognition expert evaluation? That's just like saying, do you mind if we search your car? And the answer is no. It's always no. DRE, no. But if they go ahead and bring in a DRE anyway and proceed with their procedure and tell you you have to take a drug test, at that point you do have to take the drug test or you could lose your license. This is what an attorney told us, and this is what he told us. He said, no to DRE, yes to P. So if they ask you if you submit to a DRE evaluation, you say no. And you keep saying no, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. You've got to stay brave, and you've got to fight back. And you say no. And then I said, you know, whatever happens. But at that point, the lawyer's got something to work with. That's what the lawyer told us. If you agree to a search or you agree to a DRE evaluation and you agree to it, there's nothing you can do. You're done. He's got nothing to work with, nothing to fight. But if you refuse, he's got something to work with. So anyway, look it up. Look it up, DRE, and run Google search and check it out. Read up on it. It's very scary. So, okay, Mission 91. Yes. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Jeremy.